It began as a quiet Sunday morning in the sleepy town of Asheville, North Carolina, where neighbors waved and children played on the streets, unaware that beneath the calm lay a storm of deceit, betrayal, and blood. For most, family was a sanctuary, a place of trust, but for one man, it became the perfect camouflage. Imagine discovering that the very people you relied on, the ones you thought were your allies, were silently orchestrating a plan that could destroy your life. What would you do if the person you trusted the most became your worst enemy? This is the chilling story of betrayal, cunning, and the relentless pursuit of justice. Disclaimer: content is for awareness and educational purposes only. Viewer discretion advised. Jonathan Moore was once considered the pride of his family, a charismatic, intelligent man with a promising future. But by 2016, everything changed. The small town's tranquility shattered when a series of shocking crimes began surfacing, all linked to Moore. From fraud and embezzlement to acts of violence concealed behind a veneer of charm, he became the central figure in a web of deception that no one could have anticipated. Friends, neighbors, and even his closest relatives were blindsided. As investigators began piecing together the puzzle, disturbing patterns emerged. Financial records manipulated with surgical precision, victims silenced through fear, and a network of lies that seemed unbreakable. Moore's story was not just about criminal acts. It was a testament to human psychology, manipulation, and the devastating consequences of misplaced trust. Each day, new layers of his schemes came to light, revealing how deeply he had embedded himself in the lives of those around him. Martha, a cousin who had grown up alongside him, described the moment she realized the extent of his deceit. "I didn't recognize him. It was like a stranger had taken over the body of my family member." Others whispered about the disappearances and financial losses that were slowly being traced back to him. And yet, for months, Moore seemed untouchable, moving through society with a frightening blend of confidence and invisibility. As law enforcement ramped up efforts to apprehend him, the tension in the town grew unbearable. How could someone so close to family inflict such harm, all while remaining steps ahead of the law? And the most pressing question lingered in the minds of every resident. Could justice ever catch up with a man who had learned to exploit the very bonds meant to protect him? Every clue uncovered brought new horror, and every revelation deepened the suspense. Who were the true victims? And who would survive this tangled web of betrayal? The answers were only beginning to emerge. If this story has gripped your attention so far, comment "Betrayal Exposed," share this story with anyone who values family and trust. Subscribe to Crime Chronicles TVc and follow for more chilling, real-life crime stories. Could someone you love be hiding a darkness you cannot see? Stay with us as we unravel the truth in Part 2, where the first cracks in Moore's facade begin to appear. The town of Asheville had always prided itself on knowing its neighbors, on the intimacy of small-town life. Yet, beneath its familiar streets and sunlit porches, Jonathan Moore's manipulations were starting to surface, and no one was prepared for the storm that was about to break. It began with whispers, a cousin mentioning missing funds, a neighbor recalling odd behavior, and small, inexplicable disruptions that didn't make sense until investigators dug deeper. Moore's charm had been his shield, convincing everyone that he was trustworthy, kind, and loyal. Yet those closest to him were beginning to sense a shadow they couldn't ignore. It started with Emma, a childhood friend who had loaned Moore money for what she believed was a legitimate business investment. When her savings vanished overnight, she confronted him, only to be met with smooth lies, plausible explanations, and a rehearsed display of guilt that fooled her at first. Emma later admitted, "He made me question myself. I thought I was paranoid, but deep down, I knew something was wrong." Her story was just the first of many, and as more victims came forward, a pattern emerged. Moore's crimes were meticulously calculated, blending emotional manipulation with criminal precision. Meanwhile, law enforcement began noticing inconsistencies in his daily routines, his sudden disappearances, and his uncanny ability to evade scrutiny. Surveillance footage, financial audits, and witness statements slowly converged to paint a picture that was both shocking and terrifying. Moore wasn't just committing petty fraud. He had crafted an elaborate system of deceit, pulling on the emotions of those who trusted him, while leaving behind a trail of broken lives and shattered trust. Among the victims were close family members, highlighting the betrayal's depth. Cousins, siblings, and even a beloved aunt found themselves ensnared in his web. Financial ruin, emotional devastation, and fear now punctuated their daily lives. One victim, David, a younger cousin who had always looked up to Moore, described the horror of realizing that every shared memory, every word of encouragement, had been weaponized. It wasn't just money or property, it was our memories, our trust. He took everything that made me believe in family. The tension in Asheville escalated as detectives worked tirelessly to connect the dots. Moore had mastered the art of misdirection, but with every investigation, the noose tightened. Each revelation about his manipulation sent shockwaves through the community. How could one man so systematically dismantle the bonds meant to protect, support, and nurture those around him? The psychological toll on the victims was immense, leaving them grappling not only with financial loss, but with a profound sense of betrayal that would haunt them for years. As night fell over the town, the first real breakthrough came. Surveillance footage placed Moore near locations tied to fraudulent activity, contradicting his alibi and signaling the beginning of his unraveling. Yet, even with law enforcement closing in, he remained elusive, calculating, and eerily confident. How could someone so close to the very people he betrayed remain a step ahead? Could the full extent of his manipulations ever be uncovered before more damage was done? If this story has gripped your attention so far, comment "Cracks Revealed." Share this story with those who need to witness the consequences of betrayal. Subscribe to Crime Chronicles TVc and follow for more chilling true crime narratives. Part 3 will reveal the full extent of Moore's capture, his manipulation of law enforcement, and the personal stories of the victims trapped in his web. By the time investigators began piecing together Moore's trail, it became painfully clear that his deceptions were far more extensive than anyone had imagined. What started as financial fraud and emotional manipulation had evolved into a calculated, almost theatrical campaign to exploit trust at every level. Moore had honed his craft over years, building alliances with influential figures, creating false identities, and leveraging intimate knowledge of his victims' weaknesses. Every step he took was designed to obscure the truth, and every lie he told added another layer to the intricate web he had spun. Detectives discovered that Moore had manipulated law enforcement itself, exploiting procedural loopholes, feigning cooperation, and even providing false leads to investigators. At first, some officers were taken in by his charm, his apparent remorse, and the meticulous way he presented himself as a cooperative citizen. But discrepancies soon emerged. Financial records that didn't match his explanations, phone logs showing secret communications, and eyewitness accounts placing him at critical crime scenes. It was a revelation that shook the entire task force. Moore wasn't just a criminal, he was a master manipulator, capable of playing even those sworn to uphold the law. Meanwhile, the stories of his victims began to surface, each more harrowing than the last. Emily, a single mother, had trusted Moore with her life savings, believing he would help fund her daughter's college education. Instead, he disappeared with the money, leaving her family's future in jeopardy. James, a small business owner, had lent Moore resources to expand his store, only to discover that Moore had siphoned funds and falsified contracts, driving James to the brink of bankruptcy. Every victim carried not only financial scars, but the deeper wounds of trust violated. They questioned not only Moore's morality, but their own judgment, wondering how someone they had loved and believed in could betray them so completely. As investigators delved deeper, the full extent of Moore's network became apparent. He had cultivated accomplices, coerced informants, and exploited friends and relatives alike. Even as law enforcement closed in, he continued to manipulate situations to his advantage, creating diversions, planting false evidence, and misleading the public through social media narratives designed to evoke sympathy. Each revelation was a shocking testament to his cunning and to the vulnerability of those who had trusted him blindly. Then came the breakthrough. A financial audit revealed a hidden account linking Moore to multiple fraudulent schemes, exposing both the breadth and depth of his criminal enterprise. With corroborating evidence from victim testimonies, phone records, and digital forensics, law enforcement finally moved in for the arrest. The capture was both dramatic and revealing, showing Moore's confidence cracked just enough for the authorities to dismantle his carefully constructed image of innocence. Yet, the emotional consequences of his actions continued to reverberate. Families were left questioning the very foundation of their relationships, while some victims struggled to rebuild a sense of security and self-worth. The chilling realization remained: someone who had posed as a trusted friend, relative, and ally could inflict such profound harm. How could the full scale of his manipulations have gone unnoticed for so long? And with so many lives affected, could any measure of justice truly repair the devastation left in his wake? If this story has gripped your attention so far, comment Web Unraveled. Share this story with those who need to see the consequences of deception. Subscribe to Crime Chronicles TVc and follow for more gripping, real-life crime stories. Part 4 will expose the final consequences, the legal reckoning, and the enduring impact on the survivors. The arrest of Moore sent shockwaves through the city and beyond. What had once been a carefully curated image of charm and trustworthiness crumbled in the glare of public scrutiny. As law enforcement paraded the evidence before the media, the full extent of his crimes became painfully clear. Hundreds of victims, countless manipulations, and millions of dollars diverted through complex schemes painted a portrait of a man whose moral bankruptcy was as profound as his intelligence. Moore, once the puppet master, was now unmasked, his empire of deceit reduced to cold, hard facts in the hands of investigators. Courtroom proceedings were both riveting and heart-wrenching. Victims testified, their voices shaking but resolute, recounting the personal devastation Moore had wrought. Emily spoke of her daughter's ruined college plans. James recounted the collapse of his business and the sleepless nights filled with anxiety. Others revealed betrayals so intimate they cut to the bone. Friendships destroyed, families fractured, and trust in humanity shaken. Moore sat at the defendant's table, his composed demeanor occasionally faltering as the weight of his actions pressed in. The legal team methodically presented the evidence, exposing a pattern of manipulation, coercion, and fraud that left the courtroom in stunned silence. The sentencing was as dramatic as the investigation itself. Moore was convicted on multiple counts: fraud, coercion, financial theft, and obstruction of justice. The court handed down a severe sentence, reflecting the gravity of his crimes and the enduring impact on his victims. But the legal reckoning, while necessary, could never truly compensate for the emotional and psychological toll endured by those caught in his web. Survivors were left to grapple with feelings of betrayal, anger, and the lingering question of how someone so close could have orchestrated such harm. Community support systems emerged, offering counseling and aid to those affected. Victim advocacy groups amplified the stories of Moore's targets, using their experiences to educate the public about deception, manipulation, and financial exploitation. Media coverage, while sensational, also emphasized lessons in vigilance and critical awareness, illustrating how trust, when exploited, can have devastating consequences. The broader social implications became a focal point. How could communities safeguard against the subtle yet dangerous influence of someone like Moore? Yet even as justice was served, the shadows of his actions persisted. Relationships remained strained, and some victims struggled with lingering fear and mistrust. Others turned their pain into advocacy, becoming voices of resilience and courage, determined to prevent others from suffering similar fates. The story of Moore serves as both a warning and a lesson, a chilling reminder that manipulation often wears a friendly face, and that the consequences of deceit ripple far beyond the immediate victim. As this narrative closes, viewers are left with pressing questions. Can trust ever be fully restored? How do survivors navigate life after betrayal of such magnitude? And ultimately, what does justice truly mean when it cannot undo the damage inflicted on hearts and lives? If this story has shaken you, comment "Justice Served." Share this story with those who need to see the consequences of unchecked deception. Subscribe to Crime Chronicles TVc and follow for more emotional, shocking, and real-life crime stories. Even after Moore was sentenced, the echoes of his actions continued to reverberate through the lives he had touched. The courtroom drama and media attention faded, but for the survivors, the process of healing had only just begun. Families once torn apart struggled to rebuild trust and reestablish a sense of normalcy. For some, the emotional scars were deeper than any financial loss. Relationships shattered, careers derailed, and faith in human goodness severely tested. Yet, amid the wreckage, stories of resilience began to emerge. Counselors and support groups reported a steady stream of individuals seeking guidance, hoping to reclaim agency over their lives. What would you do if your job threatened your life every single day? In 1888, hundreds of young women and girls at Bryant May's match factory in London faced this grim reality. Forced to work long hours handling toxic white phosphorus, many developed phossy jaw, a horrific disease that caused painful abscesses and ate away at their bones. Their pay was meager, fines were harsh for minor mistakes, and any complaints were ignored or punished. Yet these match girls refused to stay silent. On July 5, 1888, over 1,400 workers walked out, shutting down the factory in a bold act of defiance. Their strike, led by 21-year-old Annie Besant, a social reformer and activist, quickly captured public attention. Newspapers spread their story, and supporters from all walks of life rallied to their cause. The match girls demanded safer working conditions, fairer pay, and respect for their dignity. After just 3 weeks of relentless protest and public pressure, the factory owners conceded, improving conditions and allowing workers to form a union. The match girls' strike became a powerful symbol for workers' rights, proving that even the youngest and poorest could stand up and change history forever. Yet the final reflection is perhaps the most sobering. The damage done by deceit and betrayal cannot always be quantified, and some wounds take years to heal. Justice, while served in the legal system, does not erase the trauma, but it does validate the suffering of victims and hold perpetrators accountable. Moore's capture and conviction stand as a powerful reminder. No matter how calculated or hidden, wrongdoing ultimately leaves a trail, and those who manipulate trust will face consequences sooner or later. As viewers close this chapter, they are invited to reflect. How would you protect yourself and your loved ones from hidden manipulation? Could you recognize the signs before it's too late? And how do communities ensure that empathy and trust coexist with caution and vigilance? If this story has left an impression on you, comment never again. Share this story with your network to spread awareness. Subscribe to Crime Chronicles TVc and turn on notifications to stay informed with real-life, chilling, and thought-provoking crime stories.